is going to dominate the week, the Liberal Party, and as well the Coalition, trying to finally sort out a solution on their policy issues when it comes to net zero. Joining me live now is Liberal Senator Leah Blyth. Thank you for your time. Apologies for the issue before. I began by asking, of course, around your position. You outline your concern around net zero. Liberal leader Susan Lee is obviously being faced with a group of people saying get rid of it entirely, and others saying no, we need to keep the words net zero in some way. Is it fair to say she can't just say one side wins, that genuine compromise is needed?
I think that's the challenge for any leader of the Liberal Party, is to try and find that compromise. I think if both sides walk away sort of equally unhappy, that's probably not a bad point to reach. But I think on net zero, what we've really got to think about as the Liberal Party is what is in the best interests of the Australian people. And I think there are obviously differing views that my colleagues have where they're concerned about inner city seats. And I would say to them, you know, we've been to the last two elections supporting net zero. And it's my view that, you know, what scares Labor probably more than anything is if we come up with a differing position to the Labor Party on net zero. This is very much their problem. They've set the targets, they've legislated them, and they've committed the Australian taxpayer to trillions of dollars to achieve them for no real tangible benefit. What scares them is that we might come up with something that is in the national interest and that the Australian people can get behind. So I think this is probably one of the most important policy discussions that the Liberal Party has had in a very long time.
And so you sort of spoke broadly about the policy and not one side should win all, but talking specifically about net zero, do you have a view that that particular element should be a majority situation, so that if you're talking a party vote, for want of a better word, or dividing people into people who think you should keep it or not, majority wins on that particular aspect, and you need to be firm on that aspect either way?
I think that is going to be how it is going to have to be a democratic vote. And I'm hoping, you know, for me, the science, the data, the economics of net zero no longer stack up. And now that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a very strong economic policy, a very strong energy policy, and a very strong environmental policy. I think where I very much sit is that, you know, let's leave net zero to be Labor's problem. This is a problem that they have created for themselves. And I think we get too bogged down in terms of what that language looks like. You know, for me, it's about why don't we have cheap, reliable energy for Australians? We're a resource-rich country. We're 1% of total global emissions. You know, we seem to be impoverishing ourselves for no benefit globally to what emissions look like. We send our gas and our coal offshore. We're happy for other countries to burn it. Now, last time I checked, those emissions still impact Australia. There's no magic force field around us. And then we're buying those products back. I look at it and think, you know, Australians, we will make things much more cleanly. We will look after people better. So we should be absolutely backing the Australian people. And I would argue that if you don't have a strong economy, it's difficult to do the right thing environmentally.
So you alluded to, in sort of, I'll call it part one of the interview before we had a technical difficulty at our end, the cost, $7 to $9 trillion. Now, I've seen this quoted a bit. It was in a report by a group called Net Zero, which is made up of 2 universities in Australia and one in the US. When they talk about that potential cost, that's every dollar spent in terms of every single aspect. That would be individual companies. That would be companies investing from overseas in Australia. So is it important to stress that is nowhere near what the federal government actually pays? That's not the price tag per se for government of net zero. It's way less than that.
That's a very fair differentiation to make, but I think it's important that we know what the true cost of Australians getting there. And that's not just government spending. That is, as you've said, private businesses and individuals will need to make contributions to this as well. But, just looking at, other reports coming out, we're just looking at solar panels and wind turbines, that number is $1.33 trillion. So it is a big number either way, whether you look at exactly what government is putting into it directly or indirectly. And we've got to look at what are the tangible outcomes for that investment. And I think we would be remiss to not be analysing that as well. For any investment that business is going to make, they are going to be wanting to see a return. And I think it's fair to say that the Australian taxpayer should see a return on their tax dollars as well.
So the decision on the net zero aspects, you have said it should come down to a democratic vote. Will you, if it is done along those lines and net zero is maintained, will you fall into line and continue to support Susan Lee?
I think this isn't necessarily about the leadership, whether net zero is adopted or not. I don't want to get into hypotheticals. I feel very strongly about leaving net zero to be Labor's problem, and for us as a coalition and as a Liberal Party to be exploring policies that are in the best interests of the Australian people. And like I said, that's economic, that's energy, and that's also environmental policy. So let's see what happens on Wednesday, and then we can certainly have that discussion again next week.
Well, I'm sure we can, but I mean, isn't it fair enough when you're saying let's have a democratically based vote, that if you're calling for that if it doesn't go the way you want it to, then you'd still say fair enough. I had what I wanted in terms of the way this was decided. I just didn't get the decision I wanted, but I'll support it now.
I think it's difficult to preempt what the outcome of Wednesday will be, and there's bigger nuance to it. Is it staying with, and there's certainly been lots of different ideas circulated. Is it staying in Paris and having aspirations? Is that the compromise that we come to? I certainly don't have any issues with the Liberal Party looking at remaining a signatory to the Paris Agreement. I think it's important that we are doing our part as a nation to reduce global emissions, but I think we should be doing that in lockstep with what the rest of the world is doing. So we shouldn't necessarily be streaking ahead to our own detriment, but we should be doing our part.
Well, Senator Leah Blyth, appreciate your time today. We'll speak after the dust has settled.